I was standing at my kitchen window, watching the rain streak down the glass, when I saw my son-in-law's car idling in my driveway at 11 in the morning on a Tuesday. I wasn't supposed to be home. He knew that. My quarterly appointment at the VA Medical Center in Charleston had been on the calendar for 3 weeks. What Donovan Pierce did not know was that my cardiologist had called the night before to reschedule. I never told anyone. I had driven halfway there before I turned around and came home for my forgotten medication. I stood very still at that window and watched him sit in that car for 4 full minutes. Just sitting, engine running, waiting to make sure the coast was clear. I am 67 years old. I spent 32 years as a forensic accountant for the federal government, and before that, 2 tours in the Army that taught me one immovable truth. A man who waits that long before moving is a man with a plan. My daughter Laurel had married Donovan Pierce 14 months earlier in a ceremony on Folly Beach that cost more than my first house. She was 31, a physical therapist with a big warm laugh and her mother's stubborn green eyes. She had worked hard her entire life, paid off her own student loans, bought her own car, and built a career she was proud of. She deserved someone who matched that energy. From the first evening Laurel brought him to Sunday dinner, I understood she had not found that person. Donovan was 35, handsome in a practiced way, the kind of man who had clearly learned very early that his looks could open doors his work ethic couldn't. He sold commercial real estate in downtown Charleston, or so he claimed. He talked about deals constantly, always just about to close, always one big commission away from something enormous. But when I asked him specific questions, the kind of questions a forensic accountant asks, his answers got vague. Numbers shifted, timelines moved. He smiled through every gap in his story. My wife Celeste had passed from ovarian cancer 6 years earlier. She had been an estate attorney for 28 years, and the week before she died, she had spent an afternoon reorganizing every document in my home office on the 2nd floor. She told me, with the particular clarity that terminal illness sometimes gives a person, that she had seen too many families torn apart by the wrong person marrying into the right family. She made me promise to protect what we had built. The house, the investment accounts, the trust she had structured for Laurel's benefit. She made me swear to it. I had kept that promise by keeping that office locked. The room held everything. Tax returns going 20 years. The original trust document Celeste had drafted herself. Life insurance policies. The deed to this house, and a rental property we owned in Mount Pleasant. A brokerage account worth just under $2 million that Laurel did not know existed yet. Celeste had wanted her to earn her own identity first, to know her own value before she learned the size of her inheritance. I had honored that completely. The door code was December 4th, the day Celeste and I brought Laurel home from the hospital. I had never written it down, never told a living soul. I watched Donovan finally step out of his car. He was carrying a small canvas bag I did not recognize. He moved around the side of the house instead of coming to the front door. I set my coffee mug down without making a sound and walked to the hallway, keeping to the runner rug where my footsteps wouldn't carry. The side door clicked open with a key Laurel had given him the previous Christmas. I heard him move through the mudroom. Stop. Then I heard his footsteps on the stairs. I want to be honest with you right now. I had suspected for months that something like this might happen. That is a hard thing to admit, because suspecting it and watching it materialize in front of you are 2 entirely different animals. Suspicion you can quiet at 2 in the morning when you tell yourself you're being paranoid. You're a grieving widower looking for enemies, because grief makes you mistrustful. But watching a man move through your dead wife's house toward the room she spent her last good afternoon protecting? That is something that permanently rearranges you. I did not call out. I did not reach for my phone. I followed him upstairs. The door to my office was closed, the way I always leave it, locked, the way it has been for 6 years. Donovan was crouched in front of the keypad with something in his hand. It was a small device, black plastic, about the size of a deck of cards, pressed flat against the keypad panel. I stood in the hallway and watched him for 30 seconds before I spoke. That's a relay scanner, I said. It cycles through 4-digit combinations, takes about 8 minutes if you're patient. He spun around so fast he nearly fell backward into the door. The color left his face completely. The device clattered to the hardwood floor between us. I leaned against the wall with my arms crossed and waited. Because here is what 20 years of federal investigative work teaches you. Silence is the most powerful interrogation tool that exists. Most people cannot survive 15 seconds of it. They start talking. They start explaining. They hand you everything. Donovan lasted about 9 seconds. Laurel wanted me to grab some documents, he said. She asked me to come by. She did, I said. Yeah. He straightened up and tried to recover his footing. Some insurance paperwork, she needs it for a claim. I talked to Laurel 40 minutes ago, I said. She didn't mention that. He blinked. The story was already unraveling, and he knew it. "Which insurance company?" I said. Silence. "What's the claim number?" I said. More silence. He picked up the scanner off the floor, which told me everything. An innocent man drops that thing and kicks it away from himself. A guilty man picks it up and holds it because it cost him money and he still thinks he might need it. "Get out of my house," I told him. I did not raise my voice. I never raise my voice. Celeste used to say that was the most frightening thing about me, that I got quieter as the stakes got higher. Donovan heard something in that quiet that made him move fast. He was down the stairs and out the side door in under a minute. I stood in the upstairs hallway for a long time afterward, listening to the rain, listening to his car pull out of the driveway, listening to the house settle back into silence around me. Then I went downstairs to my kitchen, sat at the table, and started making a list. I want to pause here and ask you something directly. If you came home and found someone you were supposed to trust trying to break into the most protected room in your home, what would you do? Would you call your child immediately and blow up their marriage on a phone call? Would you confront him right then with everything you suspected? Or would you do what I did, which was sit at that table in the rain and think about every single move on the board before you touched a single piece? I chose the long game, and here is why. Laurel loved him. I understood that in the way you understand something that causes you physical pain. I had watched her face change when he walked into a room. She was not naive. She was not stupid. She was a woman who had waited a long time to feel that, and she had finally felt it with the wrong person. And there is no shortcut through that kind of reckoning. You cannot simply hand someone the truth and expect them to hold it. You have to let them arrive at it themselves, or they will choose him over the evidence every single time. I had also been doing quiet homework on Donovan Pierce for 9 months. I had a colleague at my old firm, a private investigator named Ray Corrigan, who I had worked alongside on a Medicare fraud case back in 2009. Ray was methodical and discreet, and when I called him 8 months prior, I told him I needed a financial picture. Not illegal surveillance, just the public record. Business filings, court records, liens, credit judgments. The kind of picture anyone can paint if they know where to look. The picture Ray put together was not pretty. Donovan's commercial real estate license had lapsed 18 months before he married Laurel. He had not renewed it. The brokerage he claimed to work for had no record of him as an active agent. He had 2 civil judgments against him in Mecklenburg County from a previous partnership dispute. His personal credit showed a pattern of large charges followed by minimum payments followed by accounts going to collections. And most telling, in the 14 months since their wedding, he had deposited exactly 3 checks into the joint account he shared with my daughter. 2 were tax refunds. 1 was a reimbursement from a minor fender bender. My daughter had been paying every bill in that household, and still I waited, because I needed the right moment and the right proof, and Donovan had just handed me both. The week after I caught him in my upstairs hallway, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my estate attorney, a sharp, methodical woman named Frances Okafor, who had helped Celeste structure the original trust. I told her what had happened and asked her to audit the trust's protections one more time and close every gap she could find. The second call was to Ray, to add digital forensics to his scope. I asked him to document Donovan's business activities for the next 60 days. The third call was to a locksmith, who replaced my office keypad with a biometric unit that opened only to my right thumbprint. I did not call Laurel. I want you to understand how much that cost me. She is my only child. She is the whole surviving architecture of everything Celeste and I built together. Watching her fund a man's entire life while he prowled around her father's house with a code-breaking device, and saying nothing, was one of the hardest things I have ever done. But calling her in that moment would have been for me, not for her. It would have been me releasing pressure, not protecting my daughter. So I cooked dinner every Sunday, and I let him sit at my table, and I passed him the salt when he asked for it. 6 weeks later, Ray called me on a Wednesday afternoon. "You need to see this," he said. I drove to his office near North Charleston. He had a folder on his desk and a laptop open to a state business registry. Donovan had formed a new LLC 3 months after the wedding, a property management company registered in his name only, not Laurel's. In the subsequent 14 months, he had moved $11,000 through that company account. Ray had traced 5 of those transfers to a storage unit rental in Somerville and a short-term apartment lease in Goose Creek. Not their apartment, a different one. There was a woman. Her name was in the documents. I sat in that chair across from Ray and I felt something settle in my chest like a stone dropping to the bottom of still water. Not rage. Something colder. Something final. I had spent 9 months hoping I was wrong about Donovan Pierce. Hoping I was a paranoid old man transferring grief into suspicion. In that moment, sitting under the fluorescent lights in Ray's office, with a manila folder in my hands, I understood that I had never been wrong about him for a single day. I asked Ray to compile everything into a complete documented report. I told him I needed it court-ready. I drove home in the dark and stood on my back porch for a long time, listening to the marsh. We back up to the tidal wetlands out here, and at night you can hear things moving in the grass, herons, raccoons, the water itself shifting with the tide. Celeste had loved that sound. She used to say that living near moving water kept you honest, because it reminded you that everything was passing through. Nothing holds still. The only question is whether you move with it or get dragged under. I thought about my daughter. I thought about what I was going to do to her world. And then I went inside and called her. I asked her to come to Sunday dinner, and I asked her to come alone. She could tell from my voice that something was wrong. She asked me twice if I was okay. I told her I was fine, and that we just needed to talk. She arrived at 4 o'clock. She was wearing a yellow sweater and her hair was loose, and she looked exactly like her mother at 31, which made everything harder. I had the dining table set with the good dishes, Celeste's good dishes, the ones that only come out when something matters. She noticed immediately. "Dad," she said from the doorway. "What's happening?" "Sit down, sweetheart," I said. "I need to show you some things. I want to tell you something about being a father in a moment like that. There is no script. Every word you rehearse dissolves the second you see your child's face." I had told myself I would be methodical, organized, accountant's brain. But what came out first before the folders, before any of it, was the truth. "I love you more than anything left in this world," I told her. "And what I'm about to show you is going to hurt. And I am so sorry that I have to be the one sitting across from you right now." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded once. The way her mother used to nod when she was steeling herself, jaw slightly set, eyes steady. "Show me," she said. I showed her everything. The surveillance photos from the upstairs hallway, the device on the floor, Donovan's expression caught mid-spin by the camera I had installed 6 years earlier and never removed. Ray's complete financial dossier. The lapsed real estate license, the civil judgments, the LLC, the Goose Creek apartment lease, the transfers. She went through every page. She didn't speak for a very long time. The only sound in the room was the ceiling fan and the occasional car passing on the road outside, and Laurel turning pages with steady, careful hands. When she finished, she closed the folder and set her palms flat on the table. "How long have you known," she asked, "that something was wrong?" "Since the first night you brought him here," I said. "That it was this bad? 6 weeks? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because 6 weeks ago I had suspicion and some financial irregularities," I said. "Tonight I have proof. I wasn't going to hand you suspicion and let him talk you out of it." She looked at the folder again. Then she looked at me. "He was trying to break into your office," she said. "He was. Because of the trust. That would be my assessment, yes." She stood up from the table and walked to the window and stood there with her back to me for 3 or 4 minutes. I did not go to her. I have learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is give someone the space to hold something terrible on their own terms. When she turned around, her eyes were red, but her voice was even. "The apartment in Goose Creek," she said. "How long?" "The lease started 8 months after your wedding," I told her. She closed her eyes briefly, opened them. "Okay," she said quietly. It was not a word of acceptance. It was a word of arrival. She had arrived at the far shore of something and she was planting her feet. "What do I do?" she said. "You've already done the hardest part," I told her. "You looked at it. I want you to sit with that for a moment if you've ever been in a position where you had to look at the truth about someone you loved. That moment of choosing to look, of not turning the page back over and pretending you didn't see it, is the real act of courage. The lawyers, the paperwork, the logistics, all of that is just procedure after that one choice." Laurel spent 3 hours at my kitchen table that evening. We went through everything methodically, the way her mother had taught both of us to work through hard things, problem by problem, decision by decision. She called Frances Okafor herself the next morning and retained her for the divorce. Frances had already wargamed the asset protection scenario with me, and told Laurel on that first call that the prenuptial agreement her father had quietly insisted on, which Donovan had complained about bitterly and signed anyway, was going to hold up in any South Carolina courtroom without question. Donovan did not take the news quietly. That evening Laurel told him she was filing. He called me 4 times. I let them all go to voicemail. His messages moved from reasonable to angry to threatening and back to reasonable again, across about 40 minutes, which is actually a documented behavioral pattern I recognized from my years working fraud cases. The cycle of someone who has been caught and is cycling through manipulation strategies in real time. On the 4th message, he told me I had destroyed my daughter's marriage because I was a lonely old man who couldn't let go. I did not respond. Frances filed in family court 9 days later. Because the house Laurel and Donovan lived in was a rental, There was no shared real estate to dispute. The joint account contained $1,100, which is what Donovan had contributed to it above Laurel's deposits in 14 months. The prenuptial agreement specifically excluded all assets Laurel had owned prior to the marriage, which included her car, her retirement account, and her own savings. Because Donovan had no legitimate documented income, his attorney advised him that alimony arguments would not survive discovery, particularly given Ray's report documenting the LLC and the transfers. He contested the divorce once. His lawyer filed a motion claiming I had conducted unlawful surveillance in my own home, and that the evidence should be excluded. Francis spent 11 minutes in front of the judge explaining South Carolina property law, specifically that a homeowner's right to install security cameras in their own residence is unconditional, and that no court order is required when the alleged subject enters the property voluntarily with a key obtained from a family member. The judge denied the motion before Francis had finished her second page of argument. The divorce was finalized in 4 months. Donovan Pierce walked away with the clothes he moved out in, and a duffel bag of whatever else he could carry. 2 months after the papers were signed, Laurel drove out to the house on a Saturday morning with a bag of groceries. She made omelets in Celeste's kitchen, and we sat at the table where I had shown her everything, and we drank coffee and talked for 3 hours without once mentioning Donovan Pierce's name. She told me about a pediatric patient she had been working with, a 7-year-old boy recovering from a hip surgery, and the way his face changed the first time he walked unassisted down the hospital corridor. She talked about him with so much warmth and attention to detail that I understood, in the way you understand things that don't require words, that she was going to be completely fine. She asked me about the office upstairs, whether I ever went in there. Every week, I told her. I sit with your mother for a little while. Laurel looked at her coffee cup. I'd like to go in there sometime, she said, when you're ready. I thought about that for a moment, about what Celeste had built in that room, and for whom. I think she'd have liked that, I said. After breakfast, Laurel helped me carry in the firewood from the back porch, and we stacked it next to the fireplace, and she stayed until the light started going gold through the windows. When she left, she hugged me for a long time at the front door, and I could feel her breathe in and out slowly against my shoulder the way she used to when she was small and something had frightened her and she had come to find me. Before she got in her car, she turned back. Dad, she said. He thought he was walking into an unlocked house. He did, I said. It was never unlocked, she said quietly. Was it? No, I told her. Your mother saw to that a long time ago. She nodded once the way Celeste used to. Then she drove away down the oak-lined road, the late afternoon light breaking through the Spanish moss overhead. And I stood on the porch until I couldn't see her car anymore. The office upstairs is still locked. The code is still December 4th. But it has not been a fortress for some time now. It is just the room where I keep the things that matter, and where I go sometimes to sit in the chair by the window, and feel, as clearly as I feel anything anymore, that the woman who spent her last good afternoon in that room did not leave us without a plan. She just trusted me to hold it until it was needed. I want to know what you think about what I did. Did I go too far by investigating my son-in-law without telling my daughter? Or was I right to wait until I had something she couldn't argue herself out of? Leave a 1 in the comments if you think I handled it right, a 2 if you think I should have told Laurel sooner, and a 3 if you think Donovan Pierce got off too easy. Tell me where you're watching from right now and what time it is there. I genuinely love knowing where these stories travel. And if you've ever had to protect someone you love from a person they couldn't see clearly yet, please share your story below. Someone reading these comments right now needs to know they are not alone in this. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully reimagined and rewritten as original content. Any resemblance to actual persons or events is entirely coincidental.